Now that your wife is dead, get out of here, my son-in-law shouted while living off me in my own house. I entered his room in silence and came back with 2 packed suitcases. Get out now, I said. That's when the police knocked on my door. We received a report of an elderly man having a breakdown. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. The house was too quiet without Martha. 3 weeks had passed since I buried my wife of 42 years, and the silence had become its own kind of presence. It filled every corner of our home, pressing against my chest in the early morning hours when I'd wake up and reach for her side of the bed, only to find it cold and empty. I was standing at the kitchen sink that Thursday morning, washing a single coffee cup when Dean walked in. My son-in-law didn't knock. He never did anymore. 8 months ago, when he and my daughter Ember moved into our house for what was supposed to be temporary help, he'd at least pretended to respect boundaries. Now he moved through my home like he owned it. Ross, we need to talk. His voice had that edge to it, the one that made my shoulders tense without me meaning them to. I dried the cup slowly, buying myself time. Dean was 34, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of confidence that some people mistake for strength. I'd made that mistake once. Martha never had. About what? I asked, keeping my voice level. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. About the house, about what happens now. I turned to face him fully. Something in his posture, in the way his jaw was set, told me this wasn't going to be a normal conversation. What do you mean, what happens now? Martha's gone. He said it so casually, like he was commenting on the weather. The situation has changed. Ember and I have been thinking, and we believe it's time for you to make some different arrangements. My hands tightened on the dish towel. Different arrangements. Yeah? He straightened up, taking a step closer. Look, we've been here helping you out for months. We put our lives on hold when Martha got sick. But now that she's, not here anymore, we need to think about our future. This house is too big for one person. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This is my home, Dean, mine and Martha's. Was Martha's, he corrected. And let's be honest, you can't maintain this place on your own. You're 64 years old. The yard work alone would kill you. I'm 64, not 90. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Come on, Ross. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Ember and I have been talking to a real estate agent. We could get a good price for this place, split it fairly, and everyone moves on with their lives. You could get a nice little apartment somewhere, less responsibility. The words hit me like physical blows. This was my home. The place where Martha and I raised Ember, where we celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, where Martha took her last breath in our bedroom upstairs with me holding her hand. No, I said quietly. Dean's expression hardened. No? This house isn't for sale, and even if it were, you'd have no say in it. His laugh was sharp, humorless. I have no say? I've been living here, taking care of things, dealing with your mess for almost a year. Taking care of things? The anger was rising now, hot and sudden. You've been living rent-free, eating my food, using my electricity. I never asked you to move in. You said you needed help, and Martha had a big enough heart to say yes. And now she's dead. Dean's voice dropped, became something harder. Now that your wife is dead, you need to face reality. Ember deserves better than this. She deserves a real home, not to be stuck in her childhood bedroom at 32 years old, taking care of her grieving father. Something broke inside me then, not my spirit, but whatever rope had been holding me back from seeing what was right in front of me. This man didn't care about Ember. He didn't care about me. He'd been waiting for Martha to die so he could make his move. Get out. My voice was steady, but my whole body was shaking. Dean raised his eyebrows. Excuse me? Get out of my house, you and Ember. Pack your things and leave. He laughed again, but I could see the surprise in his eyes. You can't be serious? I've never been more serious in my life. You have until this afternoon. Ross, don't be stupid. Where are we supposed to go? I don't care. A hotel. Your mother's place. Anywhere but here. You said this house is too big for one person? Fine. Then I'll live in it alone, the way it should be. Dean's face flushed red. You ungrateful old man. After everything we've done for you. Done for me? I stepped closer, and he actually took a step back. You've done nothing but use us. Martha saw it. even if I was too blind to admit it. Now, get out before I call the police and have you removed." For a moment we just stared at each other. Then Dean turned and walked out of the kitchen, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. I heard him wake Ember, heard their muffled voices arguing in the room above. I went to our bedroom, Martha's and mine, and pulled 2 large suitcases from the closet. My hands were still shaking as I carried them upstairs to what used to be Ember's childhood room, the room decorated with posters of bands she'd loved at 16, now cluttered with Dean's clothes and electronics. I pushed the door open without knocking. Dean was sitting on the bed, talking on his phone. He looked up sharply when I entered. Ember was standing by the window, her face pale and confused. My daughter looked so much like Martha, same brown eyes, same delicate features, but the expression she wore, that mix of fear and uncertainty, that was all because of Dean. "Dad, what's going on?" Her voice was small, uncertain. I set the suitcases down on the floor. "Pack your things, both of you. You're leaving today." "Ross, you can't do this," Dean said, standing up. "Ember, talk to your father. He's not thinking clearly." But Ember just stood there, looking between us, wringing her hands like she used to do as a child when Martha and I argued about something. Your father's having some kind of episode," Dean continued, his voice taking on a soothing tone. "This is what grief does. We need to be patient with him." "Don't," I said sharply, pointing at him. "Don't you dare use my grief as an excuse for your manipulation. Pack your things now." I left the room before either of them could respond, went back downstairs and waited. It took them 2 hours. 2 hours of banging drawers, whispered arguments, and heavy footsteps. I sat in the living room, in the chair where Martha used to read, and I didn't move. When they finally came down, their bags packed and piled by the door, Dean looked at me with something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Not anger, not frustration. It was calculation, cold and sharp. "You're making a mistake, Ross," he said quietly. "A big mistake. Get out." Ember stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Daddy, please, can't we talk about this?" It broke my heart to see her cry, but I knew, deep in my bones, that if I backed down now, I'd lose everything Martha and I had built. "Not while you're with him, sweetheart. Not while he's controlling every word you say." "I'm not controlling anything," Dean exploded. "She's my wife. I'm protecting her from you, you crazy old man. Out. Now." Dean grabbed Ember's arm, rougher than necessary, and pulled her toward the door. She looked back at me once, her eyes pleading, but I stayed in my chair. The door slammed shut behind them. I sat there in the silence, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Outside, I heard their car doors slam, heard the engine start. Then they were gone. I closed my eyes, exhausted beyond measure, and whispered to the empty room, "I did it, Martha." I finally stood up to him. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then, not 15 minutes later, I heard it. The sharp knock on the door, authoritative, demanding. I opened it to find 2 police officers standing on my porch, their expressions serious. "Ross Whitmore?" the older one asked. "Yes?" "We received a call about a disturbance. A report of an elderly man having a violent episode, potentially dangerous to himself and others." My blood ran cold. Behind the officers, parked across the street, I could see Dean's car. He was sitting in the driver's seat, phone in hand, watching my house, watching me. He was smiling. The 2 officers stood on my doorstep, and I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The older officer, a man in his 50s with gray at his temples, had his hand resting casually on his belt. The younger one, maybe 30, was looking past me into the house with cautious eyes. "Sir, we need to ask you some questions," the older officer said. His name tag read Martinez. "Can we come inside?" "Of course." I stepped back, my legs feeling unsteady. Across the street, Dean's car hadn't moved. I could still see him sitting there, phone pressed to his ear, probably calling Ember, probably telling her how right he'd been about me losing my mind. Officer Martinez walked through the entryway, slowly, taking in the living room with its worn furniture and family photos covering every available surface. The younger officer, Thompson according to his badge, stayed closer to the door. "Mr. Whitmore, we received a 911 call about 45 minutes ago," Martinez said, pulling out a small notebook. The caller reported that his father-in-law was having a mental health crisis, became verbally aggressive, and forced him and his wife out of the home. He expressed concern for your welfare and suggested you might be a danger to yourself. The words felt unreal, like I was watching this happen to someone else. That's not what happened, I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. My son-in-law and daughter have been living here for 8 months. Today, he told me I needed to sell my house so they could have the money. When I refused and asked them to leave, he did this. Thompson was writing everything down. Martinez's expression hadn't changed, still professional and neutral. And you did ask them to leave? Told them they had to be out today? Yes, but this is my house. I have every right to... We understand that, sir, Martinez interrupted gently. We're not saying you did anything wrong. We're just trying to get a clear picture of what happened. The caller seemed very concerned. He said you've been acting erratically since your wife passed away. Martha's name in his mouth made my chest tighten. My wife died 3 weeks ago. I'm grieving. That's not erratic. That's human. Of course, Martinez agreed. He looked around the room again. Is there anyone else living here with you? Any other family members? No, it's just me now. Do you have any medical conditions we should be aware of? Any medications you take? I understood what they were doing. They were trying to figure out if I was mentally competent, if Dean's claims had any merit. The worst part was, I couldn't even be angry at them for it. They were just doing their job. I take medication for high blood pressure, I said. And I see a doctor regularly. I can give you his number if you need it. Dr. Raymond Chen. He's been my physician for 20 years. Thompson made a note of the name. Martinez nodded slowly. That won't be necessary right now. Mr. Whitmore, I have to ask, has there been any violence? Any physical altercations between you and your son-in-law? No, nothing like that. And you're feeling okay right now? Not feeling like you want to hurt yourself or anyone else? The question hit me harder than it should have. Is this what my life had become? Standing in my own home, having to prove to strangers that I wasn't crazy or dangerous? I'm not suicidal, officer. I'm not violent. I'm just tired, and I want to grieve my wife in peace without my son-in-law trying to steal my house out from under me. Martinez exchanged a glance with Thompson. Something passed between them, some kind of unspoken communication that comes from working together for a long time. Mr. Whitmore, Martinez said carefully, your son-in-law is still outside. He's asking if we can facilitate getting some of their remaining belongings from the house. Would you be willing to allow that? Through the window, I could see Dean had gotten out of his car. He was standing on the sidewalk now, arms crossed, watching my house like a predator, waiting for the right moment to strike. They took everything that was theirs, I said. Anything left belongs to me or my late wife. Boy, he specifically mentioned some documents, Thompson spoke up. Said there are important papers relating to your wife's estate that they need access to. My blood went cold. Documents? What documents? I don't know what he's talking about, I said. But even as the words came out, doubt crept in. Martha had handled most of our finances. She'd always been better with paperwork, with organization. In the chaos of her illness and death, had I missed something? Martinez must have seen the uncertainty on my face. Sir, would you mind if we took a quick look around? Just to make sure everything's secure, that there's nothing concerning? It felt like a violation. But what choice did I have? If I refused, it would only make me look guilty of something. Go ahead. They were thorough but respectful. Martinez went upstairs while Thompson stayed with me, making small talk about the weather and the neighborhood. I could hear Martinez's footsteps moving from room to room, the creak of floorboards that I knew by heart. When he came back down, his expression was thoughtful. Everything looks fine up there. House is well maintained, no signs of distress or neglect. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Mr. Whitmore, I'm going to be straight with you. This kind of call, it's usually made with a specific purpose. Sometimes it's genuine concern. Sometimes it's strategic. Thompson shifted uncomfortably, but Martinez continued. I've been doing this job for 26 years. I've seen family disputes over inheritance, over property, more times than I can count. Your son-in-law is establishing a paper trail, a documented incident of concerning behavior. The words hung in the air between us. He was warning me. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. What should I do? I asked quietly. Get a lawyer, Martinez said bluntly. Today, if possible. Document everything, and maybe consider changing your locks. He handed me a card with a case number on it. This will be on file. The call, our visit, our observations. Make sure your lawyer knows about it. After they left, I stood at the window and watched Dean's car pull away. He'd gotten what he wanted, at least partially. A police report with my name on it, the first piece of evidence that I was mentally unstable. I went into my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, Martha's side. Her reading glasses were still on the nightstand. Her book, a mystery novel she'd never finish, was still marked with a receipt from the pharmacy. I don't know what to do, I whispered to the empty room. Martha, I don't know how to fight him. The silence that answered me was deafening. But then I remembered something. Martha had been acting strange in those final weeks, secretive almost. I'd assumed it was the pain medication, the confusion that sometimes came with her illness. But what if it wasn't? I got up and went to her closet. Behind her dresses and coats, there was a small filing cabinet we'd bought years ago. Martha had always kept our important documents there, organized with colored folders and neat labels. I opened the top drawer. Everything looked normal at first, tax returns, insurance policies, the deed to the house. But then I noticed something odd. One folder, labeled simply for Ross, was tucked in the back, separate from the others. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. Inside was a stack of papers, and on top, a letter in Martha's handwriting. My dearest Ross, it began, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably confused and scared. I need you to know something about Dean that I discovered 2 months ago. I didn't tell you because you had enough to worry about with my illness, but I couldn't leave without protecting you. I sank to the floor, the folder clutched in my hands, and began to read. Martha had known, she'd known everything. And what I learned in those pages changed everything I thought I understood about the past 8 months. Dean wasn't just manipulative, he was dangerous. And he'd been planning this for far longer than I'd ever imagined. I sat on the floor of Martha's closet for what felt like hours, reading through every document she'd left for me. My back ached from the hard floor. My eyes burned from crying, but I couldn't stop. Each page revealed another layer of Dean's deception, another piece of the puzzle I'd been too blind to see. The first document was a printout of text messages. Martha had somehow accessed Ember's phone, probably during one of the nights when our daughter would leave it charging in the kitchen. The messages between Dean and someone named Marcus went back 6 months. The old lady is getting worse, Dean had written in March. Doctor says maybe 3 months. Once she's gone, the real work begins. Marcus had replied, you sure the house is in both their names? Check the deed, joint ownership. But the old man won't last long on his own. Grief does things to people, especially at his age. My hand shook so hard I almost dropped the papers. They'd been planning this. Planning for Martha to die. Planning for what came after, like she was just an obstacle to remove. There were more messages. Dean discussing power of attorney forms with Marcus, talking about how to establish mental incompetence, researching elder care facilities. The words blurred together, each one a knife twisting in my chest. But Martha's letter explained more than the messages could. In her careful handwriting, she'd written, Ross, I discovered these messages accidentally when Ember left her phone unlocked. I wanted to tell you immediately, but you were already so stressed about my condition, I couldn't bear to add this burden while you were caring for me day and night. But I couldn't leave without giving you the tools to protect yourself. Dean married our daughter for one reason, opportunity. He's done this before. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Patricia Mendoza. Her full report is in this folder. Dean's real name is Dean Calloway, not Dean Morrison like he told us. He changed it legally 8 years ago. His first wife's parents lost their home to foreclosure after Dean convinced them to refinance and then disappeared with the money. Criminal charges were filed, but never stuck. He's smart about staying just on the legal side of fraud. I've also included financial records. Over the past 8 months, Dean has been stealing from us. Small amounts at first, $50 here, $100 there, taken from our account whenever he could access our bank card. I noticed it 3 months ago but said nothing. I was gathering evidence. The total amount is close to $8,000. I've documented every transaction. Ross, you need to act quickly once I'm gone. Dean will move fast. He's been isolating Ember, cutting her off from her old friends, controlling who she talks to. Our daughter is trapped, just like his first wife was. Please save her. And please protect yourself. I've left instructions with Carl Brennan, my estate attorney. He knows everything. His number is at the bottom of this letter. Call him immediately. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't fight this battle with you, but I've given you the weapons you need. Use them. You're Martha. The tears came again, hot and overwhelming. Martha had been protecting me even while she was dying, even in her final weeks, when every breath was a struggle. She'd been thinking ahead, planning, making sure Dean couldn't destroy what we'd built together. I gathered all the documents carefully, my hand steadier now. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something colder and more focused. Anger, yes, but also determination. The investigator's report was thorough and damning. Patricia Mendoza had uncovered Dean's entire history, his real name, his previous marriage to a woman named Caroline Hartwell, the pattern of moving in with families, gaining trust, isolating the younger spouse, and then systematically draining assets. Caroline's parents, Richard and Susan Hartwell, had lost everything. Their home, their savings, even their health insurance after Dean convinced them to take out a second mortgage on their house, supposedly to invest in a business venture that never existed. By the time they realized what was happening, Dean and Caroline were gone, and the money was untraceable. Caroline had eventually left him, but not before he'd ruined her relationship with her parents. The Hartwells died within a year of each other, Richard from a heart attack, Susan from complications of diabetes she could no longer afford to treat. Caroline lived in Oregon now, alone, estranged from what remained of her family. The report included photos, Dean with Caroline looking younger, but with the same calculated smile. Dean outside the Hartwell home, taken by Patricia's surveillance. And most chilling, a series of photos of Dean meeting with Marcus Chen, a man with a criminal record for identity theft and fraud. My phone rang, startling me out of the dark thoughts swirling in my head. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Whitmore, this is Patricia Mendoza, the investigator, Martha's investigator. How did you get this number? I asked. Martha gave it to me before she passed. She asked me to reach out to you after. She wanted to make sure you'd found her documents and that you understood what you were dealing with. Patricia's voice was professional but kind. Have you found them? Yes, just now. Then you know what Dean is, what he's done. I closed my eyes. I kicked him out this morning. He called the police on me, said I was having a mental breakdown. Patricia was quiet for a moment. That tracks with his pattern. He establishes documentation of instability, builds a case for incompetence or danger. It's textbook manipulation. Mr. Whitmore, do you have an attorney? Martha mentioned someone, Carl Brennan. Good. Carl knows everything. I briefed him personally 2 weeks before Martha died. You need to call him today, right now, if possible. Dean will escalate quickly, especially if he knows you've pushed back. What should I do about Ember? The question came out raw, desperate. She's my daughter. I can't just abandon her to him. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, Patricia said gently. Not yet. Right now, your priority is protecting yourself, legally and financially. Once you're secure, we can work on reaching Ember. But if Dean takes everything from you, you'll have nothing left to help her with. Do you understand? I did, but it didn't make it hurt any less. After I hung up with Patricia, I called Carl Brennan's office. His receptionist put me through immediately, like she'd been expecting my call. Ross? Carl's voice was warm, familiar. He'd handled our wills years ago, had been Martha's friend since college. I've been waiting to hear from you. Martha told me you might need some time before you were ready to face this. I'm ready now, I said. Or I have to be. Can you come to my office? There are some things we need to discuss in person, things Martha set up before she died. I drove to Carl's office in a daze, the folder of documents on the passenger seat beside me. His office was in downtown, in one of those old buildings with high ceilings and too much wood paneling. The receptionist smiled sympathetically as she led me to his private office. Carl stood when I entered. He was 72, with white hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He hugged me briefly, something he'd never done in all the years I'd known him. "Martha was a remarkable woman," he said as we sat down, "and she loved you very much." "I know," my voice cracked. "She left me a folder, evidence against Dean." Carl nodded. "She showed me everything. I have copies in my files, secured and documented." "But that's not all she did, Ross. Martha made some changes to her estate plan in the final weeks of her life. Changes Dean doesn't know about." He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. "Martha's will was very specific. Everything goes to you as you'd expect. The house, the savings, her life insurance policy. But she added a clause." "What kind of clause?" "If you are declared mentally incompetent within 2 years of Martha's death, or if you die within that same time frame, the entire estate goes to charity, specifically to a foundation that helps victims of financial elder abuse. Not a penny goes to Ember or Dean." The words took a moment to sink in. She knew. She knew he'd try to have me declared incompetent. She knew Dean's playbook, Carl confirmed, and she made sure that even if he succeeded, he'd get nothing. Furthermore, Martha created a separate trust, $10,000, held in my management, specifically designated for Ember if and when she leaves Dean, not before. The conditions are very clear. Ember must file for divorce, must be living separately from Dean for at least 6 months, and must agree to counseling. Only then does she access the funds. I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed. She thought of everything. "She tried to," Carl said. "But Ross, you need to understand something. Dean is going to fight. The police report from this morning, that's just the opening move. He'll try to paint you as unstable, dangerous, incapable. We need to get ahead of this." "How?" "First, we get you a full medical evaluation, physical and mental. We establish with professional documentation that you are competent and in sound mind. Second, we file for a restraining order against Dean. The theft alone, that $8,000 Martha documented, gives us grounds. Third, we make it very clear to Dean that any attempt to claim incompetence will trigger Martha's clause, and he'll lose everything." "Will that stop him?" Carl's expression was grim. "Men like Dean don't stop easily, but we can make it expensive and difficult for him to continue, and sometimes that's enough." I left Carl's office 2 hours later with a plan, a court date for the restraining order hearing, and an appointment with a psychiatrist for the following day. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Martha would have loved. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. "You made a big mistake today, old man. You have no idea what I'm capable of." I stared at the message for a long moment, then forwarded it to Carl and Patricia. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. Dean thought he was hunting me. What he didn't know was that Martha had already set the trap, and he'd walked right into it. The psychiatric evaluation took place in a sterile office that smelled of antiseptic and air freshener, trying to mask it. Dr. Helen Voss was a woman in her mid-50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of Martha. She'd been recommended by Carl, someone who specialized in elder competency evaluations for legal proceedings. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, after 2 hours of questions, puzzles, memory tests, and conversations about everything from my childhood to my current emotional state, "I want to be very clear with you. You are grieving, which is completely normal and healthy after losing a spouse of 4 decades. But grief is not incompetence. You are articulate, logical, and entirely capable of managing your own affairs." I felt something in my chest loosen. "You'll put that in writing? I'll have a full report ready for your attorney within 48 hours. And Mr. Whitmore, I've been doing this for 23 years. I've seen many cases like yours. Family members trying to exploit grief as evidence of declining mental capacity. The fact that you're here, voluntarily seeking evaluation, speaks volumes about your actual state of mind." When I left her office, I called Carl immediately. "She says I'm competent." "I never doubted it," Carl replied. "But now we have documentation. Professional, unbiased documentation. Ross, the restraining order hearing is scheduled for next Tuesday. Dean's been served. Are you ready for what comes next?" Does it matter if I'm ready? No, Carl said honestly. It's happening either way. But I need you to understand something. Dean is going to make this ugly. He's going to say things about you, about Martha, about your marriage. He's going to try to make you react emotionally in court. You cannot give him that satisfaction. The hearing was 5 days away. 5 days of waiting, of looking over my shoulder, of jumping every time the phone rang. I changed the locks on my house like Officer Martinez had suggested. I installed a security camera at the front door. I documented everything in a notebook, every phone call, every text message, every car that drove past my house too slowly. On Saturday afternoon, 3 days before the hearing, my doorbell rang. The security camera showed Ember standing on my porch alone. She looked thin, her face pale and drawn. My hand hovered over the doorknob, heart pounding. I opened the door. "Hi, Daddy." Her voice was small, uncertain. She hadn't called me Daddy in years. "Em, where's Dean? He doesn't know I'm here. He went to see Marcus, that friend of his. I told him I was going to the grocery store." She glanced over her shoulder nervously, like she expected to see Dean's car pulling up at any moment. "Can I come in? Just for a few minutes?" I stepped aside, and she walked into the house she'd grown up in. She stood in the living room looking around like she was seeing it for the first time. Her eyes landed on Martha's reading chair, and I saw tears well up. "I miss her," Ember whispered. "I miss Mom so much." "I know, sweetheart, so do I." She turned to face me, and I was shocked by how fragile she looked. The confident, vibrant woman who'd walked out of here 5 days ago had been replaced by someone who looked like they were barely holding themselves together. "Dean says you're trying to destroy our marriage," she said. But there was a question in her voice, not an accusation. "Is that what he told you?" "He said you called the police on him, that you made up lies about him stealing, that you're trying to keep me away from my own father because you're not thinking clearly since Mom died." I moved slowly to the couch and sat down. "Ember, I need to tell you something, and I need you to really listen, not with Dean's voice in your head, with your own mind, your own judgment." She sat down in Martha's chair, pulling her knees up to her chest like she used to do when she was a little girl, and something scared her. "Your mother discovered something before she died," I began. "About Dean, about who he really is." I pulled out copies of the documents, the ones Carl had made for me. I'd been carrying them with me everywhere, just in case of this moment. Dean's real name is Dean Calloway. He changed it 8 years ago, after his first wife's parents lost everything because of him. Ember stared at the papers but didn't take them. "That's not true. Dean never. He would have told me." "Would he? Did he tell you that he's been stealing from us? That he's taken $8,000 from our bank account over the past 8 months? He wouldn't do that. I have the bank statements, Em. Every transaction, highlighted and documented. Your mother noticed it months ago. She was building a case, gathering evidence because she knew what he was planning." Ember's hands were shaking. No, you're lying. Dean said you'd do this, that you'd try to poison me against him. Why would I lie? What would I gain?" She stood up abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. I can't listen to this. Dean loves me. He takes care of me. After everything with Mom, he was the only one who understood what I was going through." "He isolated you," I said, keeping my voice gentle, even though I wanted to scream. "He cut you off from your friends. When was the last time you talked to Jennifer or Casey, the girls you've known since high school?" Ember's face crumpled. "They were busy. They have their own lives." "Or Dean told you they didn't want to see you anymore. Made excuses why you couldn't go out with them. Always had a reason why they weren't good friends, weren't good for you." The silence stretched between us. I could see the war happening behind her eyes, the desperate need to believe in her marriage, battling against the truth she'd probably been feeling for months but couldn't acknowledge. "The police came because Dean called them," I continued. "He reported me as a danger to myself. He's trying to have me declared mentally incompetent so he can take control of this house, of everything your mother and I built. And once he has it, Ember, he'll leave. Just like he left his first wife, once there was nothing left to take." "Stop." Her voice broke. "Please stop." "I can't stop, because I love you, and I'm watching him destroy you the same way he's trying to destroy me. Your mother saw it. She documented everything so that when the time came, we'd have proof. She did it to protect both of us. Ember was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. If all of this is true, then everything I thought about my marriage is a lie. Everything. Not everything, I said softly. You're not a fool for loving him. He's an expert at this. He targets people who are vulnerable, who want to believe in love and family. He saw an opportunity when your mother got sick, and he took it. She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. What am I supposed to do? Just leave him. I have nowhere to go. No money of my own. He handles all of that. Of course he did. It was all part of the pattern: financial control, emotional isolation, making his victim completely dependent. You have here, I said. You always have here. This is your home, Em. It always will be. She looked around the living room, at the photos on the walls, at the worn couch where she used to curl up and read. Dean will never let me come back. He'll fight. Then we fight back, together, the way your mother wanted us to. For a long moment, Ember just sat there, staring at her hands. Then she looked up at me with eyes that were equal parts terrified and determined. I need to think. I need time to process all of this. Okay, but Em, please be careful. If Dean finds out you came here, if he knows we talked, I'll be careful. She stood up and I walked her to the door. On the porch, she turned back. Daddy, did Mom really know about all of it? She knew, and she loved you enough to make sure you'd be okay, even after she was gone. Ember nodded, fresh tears spilling over. Then she walked to her car and drove away. I stood in the doorway long after she left, hoping I'd done the right thing, hoping I hadn't just made everything worse. That night at 2 a.m, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Stay away from my wife? Dean's voice was cold, controlled. I know she went to see you today. I know what lies you filled her head with. The truth isn't lies, Dean. You're a bitter old man who can't stand to see his daughter happy. But it doesn't matter. Ember told me everything you said, and you know what she did? She laughed. She knows you're losing your mind. She knows you're making things up because you're lonely and scared. Something in his tone made my blood run cold. He was lying. He had to be lying. Ember wouldn't have told him everything, wouldn't have dismissed it all so easily. But doubt crept in anyway. The restraining order hearing is Tuesday, I said. I'll see you in court. You'll regret this, Ross, I promise you that. He hung up. I sat in the darkness of my bedroom, Martha's side of the bed still empty and cold, and wondered if I'd just pushed Ember further into Dean's control instead of freeing her. Outside, a car drove past slowly. I got up and looked out the window, but the street was empty. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It was in Ember's handwriting. Dad, I'm sorry about what Dean said to you. I didn't tell him everything. He knows I went to see you, but not what we talked about. He went through my phone and saw your address in my GPS history. I'm scared. But I'm also starting to see what you and Mom saw. Please don't give up on me. I need time, but I'm listening. I'm finally listening. I held that note in my hands and cried. For Martha, for Ember, for all the time we'd lost to Dean's manipulation. Tuesday was coming. The first real battle in what I knew would be a long war. But for the first time since Martha died, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. My daughter was waking up, and once she was fully awake, Dean wouldn't know what hit him. The courthouse was cold despite the late summer heat outside. I sat on a wooden bench in the hallway, Carl beside me, his briefcase open on his lap as he reviewed our documents one final time. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, so I kept them clasped together tightly in my lap. Remember, Carl said quietly, don't let him provoke you. No matter what he says, no matter what accusations he makes, stay calm. The judge will see through him if we give her the chance. I nodded, but I wasn't sure I believed it. Dean had been so confident on the phone, so certain he'd already won. What did he know that I didn't? The courtroom doors opened, and a bailiff called our case number. Carl squeezed my shoulder once, then we stood and walked inside. Dean was already there, sitting at the defendant's table with a lawyer I didn't recognize. A young man in an expensive suit, the kind that screamed corporate law firm. Dean had cleaned up nicely, wearing a dark suit and a somber expression that made him look concerned rather than threatening. He didn't look at me as I entered. But what made my heart stop was seeing Ember sitting in the gallery behind Dean. She was wearing a black dress, her hair pulled back severely, and her eyes were red like she'd been crying. When our eyes met, I saw something there: fear, apology, and underneath it all, a desperate plea for help that she couldn't voice out loud. "All rise," the bailiff announced, the Honorable Judge Patricia Chen presiding. The judge was a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. She settled into her seat and looked over the paperwork in front of her. "This is a petition for a restraining order filed by Ross Whitmore against Dean Morrison," she said. "Mr. Brennan, you're representing the petitioner?" Carl stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "And Mr. Morrison is represented by Mr. Goldstein. All right, Mr. Brennan, make your case." Carl laid out everything methodically. The theft documented with bank statements, the threatening text message, the false police report, the pattern of behavior established by Patricia Mendoza's investigation into Dean's past. He presented it all calmly, professionally, building a picture of manipulation and predatory behavior. Dean's lawyer objected multiple times, calling the evidence circumstantial, claiming the investigation into Dean's past was irrelevant to the current case. But Judge Chen let most of it stand, her expression growing more stern as Carl continued. When it was Dean's lawyer's turn, he painted a different picture entirely. "Your Honor, my client is a concerned husband and son-in-law who has watched Mr. Whitmore deteriorate mentally following the tragic death of his wife. The so-called theft is actually Mr. Whitmore giving my client money for household expenses, something Mr. Whitmore now doesn't remember due to his declining cognitive function. The text message was sent in frustration after Mr. Whitmore violently expelled my client and his wife from the family home with no warning and no provocation." "There was provocation," I said, before I could stop myself. Carl shot me a warning look, but it was too late. Judge Chen raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Whitmore, you'll have your chance to speak. Continue, Mr. Goldstein." "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have witnesses who can testify to Mr. Whitmore's increasingly erratic behavior. We have documentation from the police visit to his home where officers expressed concern about his mental state." That was a lie. The officers had expressed concern about Dean's motives, not my mental state. But how could I prove what they'd said in a private conversation? "We believe that Mr. Whitmore requires a full psychiatric evaluation and potentially a conservatorship for his own protection. This restraining order is simply his misguided attempt to push away the family members trying to help him." Carl stood immediately. "Your Honor, Mr. Whitmore has already undergone a complete psychiatric evaluation." He handed a document to the bailiff. "Dr. Helen Voss, a court-approved specialist in elder competency, has determined that Mr. Whitmore is fully competent, of sound mind, and capable of managing his own affairs. Her report is comprehensive and unambiguous." Judge Chen took the report and read through it silently. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Mr. Goldstein," the judge said finally, "your entire argument rests on the premise that Mr. Whitmore is mentally incompetent. This evaluation, conducted by a respected professional, contradicts that premise entirely." Dean's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Your Honor, we would request a second evaluation by a doctor of our choosing." "You can request whatever you'd like, but it's not relevant to these proceedings. This is a restraining order hearing, not a conservatorship case." Judge Chen looked directly at Dean for the first time. "Mr. Morrison, I'm going to ask you some questions directly. Please stand." Dean stood, his expression perfectly calibrated to show respect and concern. "Did you send the text message to Mr. Whitmore that's been entered into evidence? The one that says, and I quote, 'You made a big mistake today, old man. You have no idea what I'm capable of.'" "I did, Your Honor, but it was taken out of context. I was frustrated and scared for my father-in-law's well-being." "It reads as a threat, Mr. Morrison. I can understand how it might seem that way, but that wasn't my intention." "And the $8,000 withdrawn from Mr. Whitmore's account over 8 months, can you explain that?" Dean didn't hesitate. Ross asked me to handle some household expenses while Martha was ill. He was overwhelmed with her care, and I was trying to help. Every expense was legitimate: groceries, utilities, medical supplies. I can provide receipts if needed. Do you have those receipts? Some of them, yes. Others were for cash purchases that, admittedly, I didn't keep records of. I should have been more organized, but at the time, I was focused on helping the family, not creating a paper trail. He was smooth, so smooth, and I could see it working. The judge's expression had softened slightly, moving from stern to thoughtful. Then Carl played our final card. "Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness, Ms. Patricia Mendoza." Patricia stood from where she'd been sitting quietly in the back of the gallery. She walked to the witness stand with confident steps, was sworn in, and took her seat. "Ms. Mendoza, please state your occupation," Carl began. "I'm a private investigator, licensed in the state for 17 years. And you were hired by Martha Whitmore before her death to investigate Dean Morrison?" "I was." "What did you find?" Patricia opened a folder she'd brought with her. "I found that Dean Morrison is actually Dean Calloway. He legally changed his name 8 years ago, following a civil lawsuit filed by Richard and Susan Hartwell, his first wife's parents. The Hartwells alleged that Mr. Calloway had defrauded them of approximately $160,000 through a fake investment scheme. The case was settled out of court, with Mr. Calloway paying back $30,000 and agreeing to the name change as part of the settlement terms. The courtroom erupted in whispers. I glanced at Ember and saw her face had gone completely white. Judge Chen banged her gavel. "Order. Ms. Mendoza, do you have documentation of this?" "Yes, Your Honor. Court records from the civil case, documentation of the name change, and interviews with Caroline Calloway, Mr. Morrison's first wife, who confirmed the pattern of behavior that led to her parents' financial ruin." Carl took the documents from Patricia and handed them to the judge. Dean's lawyer was on his feet immediately. "Your Honor, this is a witch hunt. Past civil cases have no bearing on the current matter. They establish a pattern," Carl countered, "a pattern of targeting vulnerable families, gaining their trust, and then exploiting them financially. The same pattern we're seeing with Mr. Whitmore." Judge Chen was reading through the documents, her expression growing darker with each page. When she looked up, her eyes went straight to Dean. "Mr. Morrison, or should I say Mr. Calloway, did you disclose your previous name to the Whitmore family when you married their daughter?" Dean's careful composure cracked just slightly. "It didn't seem relevant. That was a different time in my life, a different person. I've changed." "Have you? Because from where I'm sitting, the behavior looks remarkably similar." Judge Chen closed the folder with a sharp snap. "I've heard enough. The restraining order is granted. Mr. Morrison, you are to stay at least 500 feet away from Mr. Whitmore, his residence, and his place of business. You are not to contact him directly or through third parties. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into potential fraud and elder abuse." Dean's face went red. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. I'm his family." "You're a con artist," Judge Chen said bluntly, "and this court has no tolerance for people who prey on grieving widowers. Bailiff, make sure Mr. Morrison receives a copy of the restraining order. We're adjourned." She stood and left the courtroom. For a moment, everyone just sat there in stunned silence. Then Dean turned and looked at me, and the mask finally fell away completely. The rage in his eyes was terrifying, pure and undiluted. But underneath it, I saw something else. Fear. Because for the first time, he wasn't in control. Ember stood up slowly, her whole body shaking. She looked at Dean, then at me, then back at Dean. I could see the moment of decision happening in real time. "Ember, we're leaving," Dean said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Now." She didn't move. "You lied to me." "Ember, not here." "You lied about everything. Your name, your past, my parents." Her voice was getting louder, steadier. "My mother knew. She knew what you were, and she tried to warn me, and I didn't listen. Your mother was a sick, paranoid woman who turned her daughter against her own husband," Dean snapped, "and that was his mistake. The final mistake." Ember slapped him. The sound echoed in the nearly empty courtroom like a gunshot. "Get away from me," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Don't call me, don't text me, don't come near me ever again." She walked past him, past his lawyer, and came to stand beside me. I put my arm around her, and she collapsed against me, sobbing. Dean stared at us for a long moment, his hand on his reddening cheek. Then he turned and stormed out of the courtroom, his lawyer scrambling to follow. Carl gathered his papers calmly, like this was just another Tuesday. "Well," he said, "that went better than expected. I held my daughter while she cried, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. We'd won. Not everything, not yet, but we'd won the first battle. And sometimes, that's all you need to find the strength to keep fighting." 6 months had passed since the courtroom, and the house finally felt like home again. Not the same home it had been when Martha was alive. That version was gone forever. But something new was growing in its place, something neither Ember nor I had expected. I stood in the kitchen on a Saturday morning, the same kitchen where Dean had told me to get out of my own house, and I was teaching Ember how to make Martha's famous blueberry pancakes. The recipe was complicated, requiring precise timing and a light hand with the batter, and Ember had burned the first 3 attempts. But she was laughing about it, really laughing, and that sound was worth every ruined pancake. "I don't know how Mom made this look so easy," she said, flipping another pancake that immediately fell apart in the pan. "I swear she was performing magic every Sunday morning." "She practiced," I said, watching her with a smile. "A lot. Your grandmother taught her when we first got married, and Martha burned just as many as you are now." Ember scraped the remains of the pancake into the trash and started fresh. Her hands were steadier now than they'd been in months. The trembling that had plagued her in those first weeks after leaving Dean had finally stopped. The divorce had been finalized 4 months ago. Dean had fought it at first, tried to claim that Ember was being manipulated by me, that she wasn't thinking clearly. But Carl had buried him in evidence, and Dean's own lawyer had eventually advised him to settle quietly before the criminal investigation gained more traction. The district attorney's office was still building their case. Dean had lawyered up with someone expensive, someone who specialized in white-collar crime, and the process was slow. But Patricia Mendoza had uncovered even more victims, 3 other families across 2 states who'd been targeted by Dean's schemes. It was only a matter of time. Ember had testified, given a deposition that detailed years of financial control, emotional manipulation, and isolation. It had been brutal for her, reliving all of it, admitting out loud how completely she'd been fooled, but she'd done it anyway. "There," she said triumphantly, sliding a perfectly golden pancake onto a plate. "Finally, I did it." "You did," I agreed, and the pride in my voice was real, not just for the pancake, but for everything, for the woman she was becoming, the woman she'd been before Dean stripped it all away. We ate breakfast together at the kitchen table, the morning sun streaming through the windows Martha had always loved. Ember had moved back into her childhood bedroom, the one Dean had occupied with his electronics and his secrets. She'd repainted it, a soft blue that reminded her of the ocean, and filled it with books and plants and photographs of her mother. "I got an email from the therapist yesterday," Ember said, pouring syrup over her pancakes. "The one who runs that support group Carl told me about. She said there's a meeting next Tuesday if I want to come. Do you want to?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think so. It's been helpful talking to Dr. Reed one-on-one, but I think I need to hear from other people who've been through this, people who understand what it's like to realize your entire marriage was a lie." Her voice caught on the last word, and I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "You're not alone in this, Em. You never were." "I know. Sometimes I still can't believe I didn't see it. All the signs were there, and I just ignored them because I wanted so badly to believe I had a good marriage." He was an expert, sweetheart. He'd been doing this for years, perfecting his approach. "You can't blame yourself for being trusting." "Mom saw it," Ember said softly. "Even when she was dying, even when she could barely stay awake for more than a few hours at a time, she saw exactly what he was. And she protected us." I nodded, my throat tight. We'd been through this conversation a dozen times in the past 6 months, Ember processing her guilt and grief in layers. Each time, she understood it a little better. Each time, she forgave herself a little more. After breakfast, we went out to the garden. This had become our routine. Saturday mornings were for cooking and gardening, for working side by side on something that had no deadline and no pressure. Just the simple act of growing things together. Martha's rose bushes needed pruning, and I'd been putting it off for weeks. She'd always handled the roses, had a touch with them that I never managed to replicate. But Ember had been watching YouTube videos, learning the proper techniques, and she guided me through it now with patient instructions. Cut at a 45-degree angle, just above the bud, she said, demonstrating on one branch. Mom's note said this variety needs aggressive pruning in early spring to bloom properly. Mom kept notes. Ember smiled. Detailed ones. I found them in her desk. 3 notebooks full of garden plans and plant care instructions. I think she was planning to pass them on to me someday, teach me everything she knew. I had to stop pruning and wipe at my eyes. 6 months, and the grief still ambushed me at unexpected moments. But it was different now, softer. Less like drowning and more like missing someone precious. She would have loved this, I said. You being here, taking care of her roses? I know, I think about her every day. About all the time I wasted, all the Sunday dinners I skipped because Dean said we were too busy, all the phone calls I cut short because he was hovering nearby making me anxious. She understood, I said. She never blamed you. I blame me, Ember said quietly. I should have been here more. I should have seen what Dean was doing. I should have protected her from him. Look at me. I waited until she met my eyes. Your mother's last act was protecting us, both of us. She gathered evidence. She hired Patricia. She set up that trust fund. She made sure Dean couldn't win, even if he succeeded in destroying me. Do you know why she did all of that? Ember shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Because she loved you. She loved you so much that she used her last months on this earth making sure you'd be okay. Not punishing you for being fooled by Dean. Not blaming you for not seeing it sooner. Just loving you and protecting you in the only way she could. That's what mothers do. Ember set down her pruning shears and hugged me, hard and desperate, the way she used to when she was small and scared. I held her and let her cry, and I cried too, for Martha, for the lost years, for everything we'd almost lost. Later that afternoon we drove to the cemetery. We'd been coming every Sunday since Ember moved back, bringing fresh flowers and spending time at Martha's grave. Today, Ember had brought a small framed photo of the 3 of us from Christmas 10 years ago, before Dean entered our lives. We were laughing in the picture, caught mid-joke, looking like the happy family we'd been. I'm going to keep this here, Ember said, setting it up against the headstone, so she can remember us the way we were, the way we're going to be again. We sat in the grass beside Martha's grave, not talking, just being. A warm breeze rustled through the trees overhead, and somewhere nearby, a bird was singing. I got a job offer, Ember said suddenly. A real one, not just part-time retail. It's an administrative position at the university, in the registrar's office. Good benefits, decent pay, room for advancement. That's wonderful, Em. It means I can start saving money again. Dean cleaned out our joint account when I filed for divorce, took everything we had. Carl's trying to get some of it back, but it's slow going. This job, it means I can start rebuilding, having my own money, my own independence. Are you going to take it? She nodded. I think so. Dr. Reed says it's important for me to establish financial independence, to prove to myself that I can make it on my own. And I think I'm ready. You are, I said with certainty. You're stronger than you know. I learned from the best. She plucked a blade of grass, twirling it between her fingers. Dad, I've been thinking about something, about the trust fund Mom set up for me. The $10,000 Martha had designated for Ember after she left Dean. Carl had released it 3 months ago, once Ember had met all the conditions, filed for divorce, lived separately, and committed to therapy. What about it? I want to use part of it to fix up the house. Mom's room? I think we should turn it into a proper memorial. Not a shrine, just a space that honors her, her books, her photos, her garden journals, Somewhere we can go when we miss her and feel close to her again. My chest tightened. She would have loved that. And the rest, I want to use it to go back to school. Just part-time, night classes at the community college. I never finished my degree, and I think it's time. I looked at my daughter, at the determination in her eyes, at the strength that had been beaten down but never fully broken, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Your mother would be so proud of you, I said. I'm so proud of you. That evening, after we'd returned home and had dinner together, Ember and I sat on the back porch watching the sun set. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the air smelled of the jasmine Martha had planted years ago. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? Ember asked quietly. For bringing Dean into our lives? For not listening when Mom tried to warn me? There's nothing to forgive, I said. You were a victim, Em, just like I almost was. The only person who needs to be blamed is Dean. But I hurt you. I hurt Mom. All those missed visits, all those times I chose him over my own family. You were being controlled. That's what men like Dean do. They isolate you from everyone who might see through them. But you broke free. That takes more strength than never being fooled in the first place. She leaned her head on my shoulder, the way she used to when she was little. I'm going to do better, Dad. I'm going to be the daughter Mom deserved. You already are. We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into night. Inside the house, Martha's presence was everywhere, in the photos on the walls, in the recipes in the kitchen, in the carefully tended garden she'd loved so much. She was gone, but she wasn't lost. She lived on in the protection she'd provided, in the evidence she'd gathered, in the trust fund she'd created, in every choice she'd made to ensure we'd be okay. 3 weeks later, I was sorting through some of Martha's things in the attic when I found one more letter. It was addressed to both of us, Ember and me, sealed in an envelope labeled, "When you're ready." I brought it downstairs and called Ember into the living room. We sat together on the couch, and I opened it with trembling hands. My dearest Ross and Ember, Martha's handwriting read, if you're reading this, then you've survived Dean. You've beaten him, exposed him, and most importantly, you found your way back to each other. I'm so proud of both of you. Ross, my love, I'm sorry I had to leave you to fight this battle alone, but I knew you were strong enough. You've always been strong enough, even when you didn't believe it yourself. Take care of our girl. Help her remember who she was before Dean dimmed her light. Ember, sweetheart, I need you to know something. None of this was your fault. Loving someone isn't a weakness, and trusting someone isn't a failure. Dean was a predator who targeted you specifically because of your beautiful, open heart. Don't let him take that from you. Don't let what he did make you afraid to love again. I want you both to know that my last months, even with the pain and the fear, were filled with purpose. Every piece of evidence I gathered, every document I filed, every contingency plan I made, it gave me a reason to keep fighting. Protecting you both was my final gift, and I gave it gladly. Don't mourn for me for too long. Live, laugh. Plant more roses than you think you need. Burn the pancakes and try again. Tell stories about me, the good ones and the embarrassing ones. Keep me alive in your memories, but don't let those memories keep you from creating new ones. You're going to be okay. Both of you, together. All my love, always and forever, Martha. By the time we finished reading, we were both crying, but they were good tears, healing tears. Ember hugged me tight, and I hugged her back, and we stayed like that for a long time. Dean sent one final message 3 months later. It came through a mutual acquaintance, someone who didn't know better than to pass it along. Just 3 words, "This isn't over." But he was wrong. It was over. The restraining order was permanent. The criminal investigation was moving forward. And most importantly, Ember was free, truly free, for the first time in years. We didn't respond to the message. We didn't need to. Dean had already lost everything that mattered, his control, his credibility, his ability to hurt us. In the garden, Martha's roses bloomed brighter than ever, tended by hands that had learned to be gentle, to be patient, to trust in the slow work of healing. Ember was taking classes 3 nights a week, coming home energized and excited about her future. She'd even started dating again, carefully and slowly, but without the paralyzing fear that Dean would always define her relationships. And me? I was learning to live again. Not the life I'd had with Martha, that was gone. But something new, something that honored her memory while still moving forward. Every Sunday, Ember and I had breakfast together. Every Saturday we worked in the garden. And every day we chose to be grateful for the battles we'd won and the peace we'd earned. Martha had given us the weapons we needed. We'd used them well. And now, in the quiet satisfaction of a life reclaimed, we understood that the best revenge isn't grand or theatrical. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stay broken.